despising it just as fuel. The reality is that the struggle itself, the agitation, the fight against racial injustice, that is what lets you know that not only you are alive, but that those who are seeking to oppress you and harm you have not won the day. And so, Professor Bell, when he talks about his notion of permanence of racism, he talks about in his article for racial realism, and he ends the article with a story about a case that he worked on. In the efforts of one of the organizers in Mississippi to really try and enforce a court order to desegregate schools. And he talks about how this organizer, this older black woman, didn't just agitate because she knew that she would win out. She didn't think that she would actually change people's minds or see success within the course of her lifetime. But she agitated because she knew that the fight itself, the protest, the struggle, the agitation, that's what let her know that she was alive, that she is here, that her life mattered. And it forced others to comprehend and understand what they were doing to her and what they were doing to her community.
Another aspect of critical race theory is that, as you've mentioned, sometimes you do make progress in terms of racial justice, but another aspect of the theory is that racial progress is cyclical, that there's an ebb and flow, that whenever there is progress, almost inevitably there's a backlash. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So this is kind of central and really key to kind of this notion around interest convergence. And we see progress being made in moments where interests align of those in the dominant group in color, black and brown people. And then we see the backlash and entrenchment when those interests are no longer in alignment. And I think we saw that, we've seen that throughout history. So you think about the Civil War and Reconstruction, and then the end of Reconstruction, and the massive era of lynchings and racial terror that followed that era. We saw it with the civil rights movement and the tremendous advances that were made, not only starting with thinking about Brown, but all the way up through the 1968 Fair Housing Act, and then following that era, the era of Reaganomics and the kind of conservative backlash and the rise of the conservative movement. And see it with the election of Barack Obama and the 8 years that he was president, and the kind of immediate backlash with the rise of the Tea Party, eventually morphing into the election of Donald Trump as president. And I think we're seeing it now again in this country with the movement that really has forced us to grapple with the ways in which police violence and has so very acutely harmed black and brown communities. But not only that, but beyond that, think about the ways in which racial inequality has manifested itself across society in this uprisings over the course of the summer of 2020. And then the tremendous kind of response, the kind of orchestrated response we talked about earlier with respect to kind of pouring all the grievances and fears that come with changing of society and the pointing out of some of these inequalities and injustices in the critical race theory and kind of the backlash that we see today. And so history is cyclical and it works in that way. And I think for us, when we think about what critical race theory teaches us and the ways in which we think about that lens, our task is really to work to see as many peaks of progress within our lifetime as we can and stem the tide of the backlash. But the backlash is inevitable in many ways, just because, as we described, history is cyclical.
And the backlash, I mean, it could take powerful, and in my view, move in an evil direction. I mean, when I think about the way the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, when I think about the attack on voting rights that's going on all over the country right now, the assault on affirmative action. I mean, there's so much. I mean, it really does feel like we're going backwards now. And so when people talk about the cyclical aspect of progress, we're looking at sort of the backwards aspect of that cycle.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and something you just described there, kind of each one of those examples you gave are all this is also kind of a part of critical race theory. This notion that law and courts are used as tools to kind of preserve the status quo, right? To preserve the structures of inequality, racial inequality that have so driven so many of the challenges that we see in the world around us. And so in each one of those instances, we've seen the laws protecting some of the more powerful interests that really will kind of further embed and entrench racial inequality in our society.
We have just 1 minute left, believe it or not, but I want to know, when you became a lawyer, why did you decide to focus so much of your efforts and your energies on racial justice? Why did you personally make that decision?
Well, so it actually started long before I became a lawyer. When I was in about fourth grade, my family moved from a community that was largely black and brown to one that was largely white. And my experiences there demonstrated to me very clearly the ways in which my race and identity shaped not only the world around me, but shaped my experiences and the way that people experienced me. And I decided right then and there that I wanted to do something about that. And as I came to learn more and more about our country's history, and the ways in which race and racial inequality, we started kind of gaining a consciousness about the ways in which courts and law were complicit in that racial inequality. I couldn't help but want to get involved in this fight.
I, for one, am glad that you made the decision that you made. I'm also glad that you were willing to be with us today. Thank you so much. We've been talking with Vincent Sutherland of NYU Law School, and to our viewers, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.